Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Zhong. Zhong is a unique mage who focuses on large AoE damage and tankiness in the form of additional protections and healing. He's definitely a god who's starting to show his age, so I wouldn't really recommend him to a new player as a long-term investment sort of character, although he is pretty easy. And for that matter, he'll still easily one-shot anyone who disrespects him too much. His builds tend to be a little funky. He can go the normal mage build, but he usually wants to focus a little more on lifesteal and tankiness if he can. That said, he can abuse a lot of the relevant items right now, so he generally runs a meta build with maybe 1 or 2 items that make you look twice. Relics wise, you can go beads and aegis, and this is just fine, but you really want beads and blink. This will of course make sense later, and you can decide for yourself once it's explained what your preferences will be. Shard wise, it's just Horn Shard. I mean, what else? Let's get to a simple passive, but a unique one. Zhong gains 1 of each type of protection every time anything dies nearby him. This means that ally or enemy gods, ally or enemy minions, neutral minions like buff camps, and so on will grant Zhong protections when they die. He can stack this up to 40 times, giving himself a nice little boost, and will lose half of these stacks every time he dies. So 2 big takeaways. This of course makes a much bigger difference in the early game than it does later on in the match, and secondly, it means that getting behind and being camped on by an enemy jungler is very bad news for Zhong. So you have to be very careful until you get this passive fully stacked. Not that it's too difficult, thanks to abilities like his first ability. Zhong throws a projectile which passes through all enemies and walls. Enemies hit by this ability are slowed and take damage over time. And this damage over time lasts for a whopping 5 seconds, and yes, the slow lasts for that entire 5-second timer. So despite not having the best speed or range, this is easily one of the best poke abilities in the game. And trust me, you will poke with it, as it's sensationally easy to hit. It's an ability you want to be using all the time, it's Zhong's biggest threat in his core kit. So you want to look to snag people with it constantly. Of course, you want to slow this down as the game gets later and later, but really in the early and mid game, if you're near or at max passive stacks, you want to try and clip enemies with this ability all the time. Of course, this ability is a core part of Zhong's wave clear, but luckily he can fall back in his second ability for that. Zhong deals damage in a very wide cone AoE in front of him, and that's about it for this ability on its own. When Zhong uses the ability on a target who has his first ability on them, he deals 75% of the remaining damage over time to the target, and heals himself for up to 3 times. So, very clear, right? 1, 2, and watch them die. Well, not so fast. Since you only deal 75% of the remaining damage of your first ability, it heavily reduces your total damage output with this combo. Of course, once your items get going, or you enter the late game, just 1-2. It's going to completely annihilate health bars. But earlier on in the match, you want to let your damage over time cook for a bit, and then use this ability for burst and that heal. Because remember, it's not like you get more of a heal for doing your second ability sooner or anything, so just let your first ability take about 3 times before using your second ability on just about any target, barring of course when you're just finishing off a low target. Keep in mind too that 2ing with your 1 on top of someone will also stop the slow, so 2ing too early will negatively affect both how much damage and control you deal with your first ability. That brings me to another point too. You don't have to apply your 1 or anything to use this ability. You could just do it for some incredibly easy to hit damage or finish off targets and just poke people, since I'm sure you can tell the old 1-2 combo isn't exactly fast. Nor is it particularly safe to go for over and over again, so be sure to pace yourself and not get yourself killed by trying to do the same combos over and over again against your lane opponents. Luckily, if you do get yourself caught, Zhong has his third ability to keep him safe. Sorta. Zhong swings his, brush around, dealing damage to and stunning all enemies around him. And also, if the enemy had Zhong's first ability on them, it will again detonate 75% of the remaining damage. Obviously though, damage is not the main intent with this ability, although it does do a bit. It's about as self-peel abilities get in SMITE. When someone jumps on you, you use this ability to get them off of you. Timing is key though. Make sure that enemies can't just use their movement or CC abilities after the stun ends to keep on chasing you. Additionally, you can also slap enemies with your first ability after the stun ends for some additional CC to keep them off of you. And then, if they're still chasing you, as the slow comes to an end, turn around and 2 for some extra healing too to keep yourself alive. And when enemies with Zhong's first ability are hit with his third ability, they are stunned for twice as long. This means that aggression works well too. Slow with your 1, walk up with the stun, chase with basic attacks, and as they get out of range, do them. Do this sparingly of course, since Zhong is very easy to jump on and punish, but the chase is made better by that second part of Zhong's third ability. You may have noticed this scroll next to Zhong which fires when he basic attacks. And yeah, that's kinda it. Once your third ability is leveled, Zhong will fire an additional projectile with his basic attack which will deal half the damage of his basic attack, sort of giving him magical crits. So while most mages do their damage and back up, you absolutely want to keep basic attacking if you can do it safely as Zhong, because the damage on offer here is no joke. And the great thing is, Zhong has a very simple and high damaging ultimate to help him finish off targets and survive fights. In Zhong's ultimate, he begins firing out projectiles every second for 5 seconds, which will track any enemy gods when the projectile is launched. Meaning that if they are in the AoE when the demon is fired out, the demon will be hitting them. In the same vein, if an enemy enters but then exits the AoE before a demon is fired, they will not be tracked by one. Zhong also gains double whatever his current passive protections is giving him, meaning that he can have up to 80 bonus protections for the duration, yet another reason to keep that passive stacked at all times. Zhong also can't be slowed or displaced for the duration. And finally, Zhong will lose half of his current passive stacks at the end of the ability. So, wow, that's a lot, but as I'm sure you can tell, it's a pretty simple ability. This ability is Zhong in team fights, so let's nail down when you want to use this ability. First and foremost, it's why Blink is seen almost 100% of the time on Zhong unless he really needs to go ages. So Blink ult, that's easy enough. A few counters to this ability are clear too. Even though Zhong will keep firing out demons no matter what, things like stuns, roots, but especially player-made walls like Ymir or Yomoja Wall are going to completely destroy him. Movement abilities will make the ability inert too. Yes, the demons will follow enemies if they dash or leap, but individual demons don't do very high damage. You really need to get most, if not all, of the ability on a target for it to be effective. So this means that you want to look for a Blink ult after any potential hard CC, structures, or easy to use movement abilities that would heavily impact your ultimate are down. Waiting like that is an option in some matches, but in most matches there's simply too much to worry about. So instead, you can use this ultimate as the perfect engage and zone control tool. This means that Zhong is heavily matchup dependent. Getting against a team that's too mobile or has an easy out to your ultimate, like against a Ymir Wall or Maui ult, or any easily applied CC that isn't a slow or a knockback, and Zhong is going to be extremely hard to make effective. Don't forget about the tools we've talked about so far too to increase the effectiveness when this ability does work though. When you pop your ultimate and you know it's going to be a good one, you should look to use your first ability slow and your third ability stun to lock enemies in the ultimate, as well as of course deal extra damage too. Of course there are niche uses too, like using it to get out of bad situations thanks to the bonus protections and immunity to slow and knockbacks, and just using it to ensure an enemy's death as you chase them down thanks to this ability chasing down anyone within the radius. Let's get to some combos with Zhong. 1. Let it cook, then 2. 1, 3, 2. Blink, 3, 1, damage over time for a bit, then 2. 1, ultimate, 3, 2. Blink, ultimate, 1, 3, 2. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 2 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. Then max your 1, your 2, then your 3, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Some max the 2 over the 1 for some extra burst as well as heals, but the 1 does more damage, is more reliable as wave clear and poke, and still offers plenty of burst when detonated with the 2 or the 3, so I'd say it's the clear winner. So that's Zhong, a god with plenty of very bad matchups in the game, but when it's a good matchup, it's very good. If Zhong is ever in a situation where he can blink ult into the enemy backline and only has to use beads on 1, maybe 2 abilities, he's just going to cook every single member of the enemy backline. His damage is absolutely immense, and his ability to chase down enemies with his first ability and burst them with his second, and third, all while dealing heavy damage over time within the ultimate is second to none. Zhong's game plan, however, as I've been saying over the course of the video, is fragile. Too many CC abilities on the enemy team will easily stop Zhong so long as they don't use them all at once on him. And at this point in SMITE, most gods are just far too mobile for him to catch, and the best of the best, like Cernunnos or Ishtar, can both CC and escape from him all by themselves. So if you pick Zhong into the wrong team, you're going to be in a bit of a pickle. He does have some great matchups too though, against metagods too, like Aphrodite, Hathor, Hel, Poseidon, Danzaburo, Martikaros, Izanami, Hercules. The list just goes on of gods that Zhong can easily walk at like Martikaros or Poseidon, or niche cases like his slow and knockback immunity against Hercules, as well as Poseidon, or his demons following Izanami through her dash. It's a lot of little things that keep Zhong effective despite his age. Although again, expect to feel worthless sometimes on this character until you get a feel for how you want to play out his harder matchups. Hint, slowly. That's all I have on Zhong for now. Thanks for watching.